So some natural frustration on the side of the teacher is that when you say something, you just kind of have an expectation that they got it and they're going to follow the directions. But if they're sort of pre-programmed to ignore the first or second or third time you say something, there's some frustration that, that we have to deal with as teachers. And then I try to let my students know that that's something that is really frustrating for their teachers at school too. And so we'd see, kind of a lack of productivity that way. And I've caught myself just naturally saying things 2 or 3 times. And I think, why do I have to say things 2 or 3 times? But I've trained myself to do that because I'm more effective as a teacher because I know they're not going to catch it always on the first one.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Conversations from the Heart. Today, we are joined by Master Joshua Hong. He's the founder and master instructor at Eternal Martial Arts in Houston, Texas. They've got a couple of locations out in Houston, so be sure to check them out.
Master Hong, so great to have you on the show. Can you get us started by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your martial arts career up until this point?
Sure, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be a part of this. So my martial arts journey started when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I never can get the dates quite right because my mom entered me in when I was so young. So the story keeps changing. I was 4, I was 5. I think I was probably about 5 years old. And I just loved training martial arts. Even as a kid, I was really passionate about it. And so I had a lot of fun. And I had an older brother too, and he trained with me. And so we both started and completed our journey to black belt. And then so what had happened was, even though I was super passionate about it and loved it, my dad felt that once I got my black belt, that was really it. And he wanted to get me into other things. And so there was kind of a 10-year break where I didn't train in martial arts. But when I was old enough to get a job, when I was about 16, then I got back into it. I asked my old instructor I said, I'll work for you. And I'll clean the trash cans, whatever it takes, and in trade for practice. And he thought that was a good deal. So that's how my martial arts journey started again.
Gotcha. Wow, it's quite the adventure there.
Yeah.
And then when you got back into it, you've been training just in Taekwondo over these last, I don't know how many years.
So Taekwondo is my principal martial art. And if anybody ever asks me, what kind of school do you have? I always tell them I have a Taekwondo school, but I've been fortunate to be able to train in a few different martial arts. I've done some Krav Maga. I've done actually quite a bit of Krav Maga. I've done some ninjutsu. That was very interesting. I've gotten to do some kickboxing / Muay Thai. And I've also trained quite a bit in Filipino Kali, double stick, single stick, blade, empty hand. And so that's kind of helped me to round out some of my martial arts journey. And so I'm looking forward in the future to get into a little bit of some more grappling arts, some jiu-jitsu, maybe some Aikido and things like that, even Hapkido. But by and large, I'm a Taekwondo school.
Awesome. So great. Well, I mean, it sounds like your journey is not so different from our own. Here at our academy, we try to blend in. I liked what you said on your website, Bruce Lee's quote of, take what works and throw out what doesn't. I feel like that's a common sentiment amongst martial artists, especially these days. And we're definitely no exception to that rule. We try to take what works and blend it into our curriculum as well. So, and so you've been doing martial arts for 30 years or so, 20, 30 years. Sounds like quite the journey. Today we wanted to talk about, attention span in the martial arts. It is such a interesting time that we live in. Kids, when I was growing up, used to go outside and play in the backyard. And I remember for me personally, I was only able to watch TV on Saturday morning cartoons. Otherwise, I had to be outside doing things. And I definitely, as an instructor, have seen a big change in kids over the years. And I think, what I wanted to ask you today is, how do you feel the attention span of kids has changed over the years due to, all these devices and things that they're watching, and they provide such immediate gratification for a limited attention span? And how has that affected the students that are coming to your school?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up Saturday morning cartoons, because that is one of my speeches I like to give to my students. And I say, you guys will never understand and you will never appreciate the joy, the absolute joy of Saturday morning cartoons, because you were robbed of cartoons all the rest of the week. And they just kind of all came on Saturday morning. I mean, that was something you would wake up early for, and it was a big deal. Am I right?
Yes.
And
absolutely.
so, but now we live in an on-demand society where kids can literally tune into a cartoon on their phone. They could do it, 24 hours a day with cable and everything. And that's great. And that's a high level of service. But so it kind of warps the way we look at things. And now cartoons no longer a treat, but it's just something that, we have. And I can remember the same kind of story about going to a friend's house and watching the movie Superman 2 on their television because it was being broadcast over ABC or something like that. So those are the things that kids just don't look forward to anymore because they're so commonplace. But having said that, now the kids are big into their tablets and their phone devices and things like that. And I think that it's as much good as it is bad. It's that double-edged sword. So it solves a lot of problems. It creates a lot of new problems. And I will say this for myself, in all honesty, my device has created in me, that that lack of attention. And so how much more is it affecting our kids? It's a big question out there, and I'm not sure anybody knows just yet. I've seen it show up, on the floor when we're training. Kids have a tough time focusing, and so we try our best to shake them out of that. But if they're spending a large amount of time each and every day on those devices, that attention span gets shorter and shorter and shorter, even to the point, if everyone's honest about it, they'll have on the TV, and then there will be a tablet sitting in their lap, and then their phone, they'll be on their phone. And so it's just like layers and layers of this stuff because people's attention span has just gone down to nothing.
Absolutely. And it's an interesting thought. It's actually probably just as bad for adults as for kids because, for adults, they're using social media like Facebook and Instagram and things like that, which are definitely demanding on your attention. And, kids may be using that at some point, but certainly I have felt, it's a very important thing to market your business through Facebook. And as I've tried to market my business more and more, I found myself becoming sort of addicted to Facebook in the same way that, I warn my students not to get addicted to, but sort of as a necessity to build my business. It's definitely a demand on your time and your attention, and can really take things in the wrong direction.
Right.
What are some of the, the negatives of that lack of attention you find on the floor?
So I think there's a natural frustration that happens as I consider myself a teacher. I'm not like a teacher in school, but there's some similarities there. So some natural frustration on the side of the teacher is that when you say something, you just kind of have an expectation that they got it and they're going to follow the directions. But if they're sort of pre-programmed to ignore the first or second or third time you say something, there's some frustration that, that we have to deal with as teachers. And then I try to let my students know that that's something that is really frustrating for their teachers at school too. And so we'd see, kind of a lack of productivity that way. And I've caught myself just naturally saying things 2 or 3 times. And I think, why do I have to say things 2 or 3 times? But I've trained myself to do that because I'm more effective as a teacher because I know they're not going to catch it always on the first one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's problems there. And then, lack of focus is just really tough because if a kid's not stimulated doing whatever, let's say we're doing a deep stretch and that's not really stimulating, they'll almost find a way to entertain themselves for a minute-long stretch, and that can manifest itself by irritating another student around them or being inappropriate or just making noises or whatever. And so I think we're a big discipline school. We're also a really fun school, and we try to make everything just a fun, positive environment. But that kind of stuff can really bring the class, where we're trying to head as a team, that can bring everything down a notch.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When I first started teaching, I was kind of like an entertainer, and I was always changing my activities every 10 minutes or so to keep it fun and exciting. And then over the years, I was like, my students aren't getting that good because they're just constantly jumping from one thing to the next. And in order to get really good, you got to train kind of like we did back in the day, where, I assume you're similar to me, where it's just basics again and again and again to nauseum. And I think we need to find a balance, obviously, because that's not super marketable. And my school that I trained at had 3 kids and 10 adults, and it was in a musty basement, and it wasn't, I would consider, a successful business model, but it certainly produced results. And I think one of the challenges we have as instructors is trying to figure out, okay, well, we want to keep it entertaining, which means we need to change up the activity, especially these days because attention span is so short. But how can we also get them to a good level of skill by rinsing and repeating those fundamentals? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, I know what you mean about being an entertainer. And one of my instructors, he called it infotainment. So where you're getting the information, but you're being entertained at the same time. And I like to crack a lot of jokes, and I like to keep things jovial and fun. But that's kind of the best we can do, because you have to repeat things in order to get it. And so I do talk to my students quite a bit about, repetition, repetition, repetition. And when you do something over and over again, what's that called? And, somebody will be brave enough finally to say it's boring. And I say it's boring. But that's what learning looks like, because if you think that you do 100 punches, that you're going to understand how to punch, well, then you totally fundamentally misunderstand. It's going to take a lot of reps in a lot of different ways. And we try to, you guys are probably familiar with the term, disguising repetition. We'll do it again and again, and we'll try to make it different and so forth and so on. But we do that a lot more in the beginning of the journey. And as our students progress, their focus and their understanding of how we train changes, and we can change the tempo a bit. We can have longer talks and things like that. But yeah, it's a real challenge, because you'll lose a lot of students with that old time training, that the way, Master Olds, that you and I were brought up, you would stand in a stance for an extremely long time.
Yes.
And the average student's just not doing that these days.
You hold each count of your form for 30 seconds, I actually spent some time over in Korea training, and the first 6 months when you're on the Krugi team, you're just working on your bouncing, for all day long, footwork and bouncing all day long, jump rope. Kids would blow their brains out with that kind of repetition. But that's how you get really good, And even when we did our kicks, when we were first starting, we had to do them very slowly, because if you can do a kick very slowly, you can do it fast. So, we'd be doing these very slow kicks up and down the floor, and we'd be bouncing, bouncing, bouncing to our calves were basically bleeding. And yeah, it is a challenge. How can we make it fun and entertaining, but also disguise that repetition so that they can get good over, long period of time. Another thing that I was thinking about when you're talking is the difference between kind of tacit knowledge and the knowledge that we seem to find all the time. And I think a lot of kids, because we're basically like cyborgs with our smartphones. We can access anything we want at a moment's notice. We think we know everything. And it's also true that we probably know more now than we've ever known before. I remember when I was a kid, I discovered 2 or 3 life hacks, and I was like, it was mind blowing. Now you can watch a video on like 50 life hacks and just get like onslaughted with those golden nuggets. But it makes me sometimes sad because I'll have students come in, and one thing that I've distilled down over 20 years of training in the martial arts that I'm so excited to share with them, they'll just be like, oh, okay, yep, next, you know, because they don't realize how much went into learning that little detail. And I think it's because when you live in a world where everything is just kind of rote knowledge, just boom, 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 like this, realizing that there is a knowledge that's much deeper than that is hard for people to understand. I think we live in an era of intelligence and not an era of wisdom. And kind of where we came from in the olden times was very much an age of wisdom, where people, you know, you could have someone who knew very little, but he knew it very well, and people would universally accept that and understand that. And I think now we're beginning to forget how important that is.
Yeah, I mean, we live in the information age, and everything is accessible. You know, it ends up being a YouTube video, and you can if you can imagine it, you can get to it. But I talk to my students about this. It's kind of like an iceberg, you know, and it can look really impressive at the top, but you don't know what's underneath. You don't know about depth of knowledge. And so I have to credit one of my instructors. Then this guy's truly a phenomenal martial artist. I mean, it's so impressive, the different martial arts he knows, but he's able to just change hats. I mean, he could go from doing Muay Thai right into, you know, some exotic Kung Fu. And so it's that, not only that breadth of knowledge, but really that depth of knowledge. And so that's like what's impressive to me, because anybody can know 1,000 tricks, but can they do it very well? Can they call on it on a moment's notice? Is it like breathing to them? Or do they have to really sit and think about it? And I think that's one of the coolest things about specialization. You know, if we just train in one martial art, we'll just do better with that martial art. Because we're spending more of our time in that thing. But I think there's just the way that training's gone, you know, people are looking to complement their styles. I mean, that's just what everyone's done. I don't think it's wrong. I just think that there's a great example. There's this documentary, and I would just, anybody that's watching this, I would really say, just check it out. It was on Netflix. It's called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And it's about a little Japanese guy who just his passion is sushi, and it's amazing the people that make rice for him, something that we think should take about a day to learn. I want to say he has him train on rice for a year, because that's depth of knowledge. That's about really crafting something special, versus just, okay, I was able to repeat your routine. Was that good enough? Am I ready for my belt? You know, it's that depth of knowledge that we're really after in my martial arts training. And I try to pass that on to my students too.
Yes, sir.
Any thoughts, Jesse, on the topic?
Well, I just wanted to, I love Jiro Dreams of Sushi. I watched it.
Yeah. It's a fantastic
freshman or sophomore year of high school. And even then I was like, this is something different, right? Like I started to kind of look at the things I was doing and think, oh, like I can really go deeply into something. And so I think that movie came to me in a really formative time in my life. I have questions about the way this lack of attention, or this, I always see it sort of manifest as a wanting, kind of as you were just saying, the student says, I've done your routine, where's the belt, right? Like, I've got it. And I'm curious about the ways you see that manifest in the different age groups, because for us, you know, for myself, I see our little warriors, which are like our 3.5-year-olds to our 7-year-olds. They just like, their eyes just glow bright when they look up at the belt rack and they see all those different increments. And when they get those belts, and it's always like, oh, you know, the next thing is right around the corner, and they're so excited. And you know, the kids are a little similar to that, but the adults, I see the impatience arise in terms of priority, right? they'll kind of come in, and myself included as an adult who trains here at the school, I always have to every single week say, is this my priority? Is this my priority? And when it's not, you see people kind of fade out, and they might come in for another class and they might fade out and they might come in. And I feel like that is attributable to this sort of attention span and this ability to really dig in and focus. But what do you think about that, Mr. Hong?
Yeah, some of the training I do, I own a childcare as well, and so some of the training I do is childcare based. And this guy was a trainer. He had a great line, and he said, my father worked for like 60 plus years, and at the end of his career there, they finally gave him a gold watch, and that just meant the world to him. And he said, but when we hire people today, the brand new young people that are coming in, they want the gold watch on their first day. And it's just true. It's not a slam on millennials, but people have just a completely different mindset about achievement and when they should get things, including everything down from, we talk about, the kids everybody gets a trophy at the soccer game and stuff, up to adults that they seemingly are more frustrated than they used to be in the past. And I think that just goes back to an attention, but also people, I think, sometimes are being rewarded when they shouldn't be rewarded. It's always being told good job, even when you didn't do a good job, you just did a basic job, or you just showed up, like good job showing up. Like, well, that's not a good job. And that, and there was a point at which in my training, I mean, I can't tell you when my teaching, and I felt like I fell into that category of always just telling people that, hey, you're doing it as a super punch and stuff. We want to be motivational, but I don't want to lie to my students. I don't want to say to you, hey, you did a good job, and I'm just lying to that student because I'm giving him or her a false perception of how they're really doing. Mm-hmm. And so then they may in their mind build themselves up and say, well, he told me I was doing really good, and then I just got beat up. They were overconfident. So it's a balance that we all have to strike as instructors. You want to be motivational, you want to be positive. On the other hand, you don't want to be dishonest with your student, but definitely people, they see things differently than they used to, and they're not willing to work as hard as long, I think, as they used to. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, I agree. I think we kind of all agree, but we're not really doing much about it. I feel like as martial arts instructors, we're kind of positioned that we can help, at least in a small way, change the course of our community, our personal communities. That story, or that idea of that story you told about your father and the watch, and the younger generation just wanting the watch on day one, reminded me of, I went to a festival not too long ago, and I'm sitting there tabling for my booth, and I'm trying to get out there and grab people and say, hey, you want to break a board? You want to come in for a free lesson? And we're doing this thing where, they break the board and then they sign up for a free lesson later in the week. And there's a guy sitting right next to me, and I actually knew that booth because the owner of that business is a personal friend of mine, but he's always hiring new talent to come in there and run his booth for him. Unlike me, I had to go out there myself. And got to work on that. That's a good strategy. But I was talking to this young guy who he had working for him, and he wasn't interested in selling me what they were selling at the table. He was just kind of chit-chatting about something randomly, and I'm thinking, you should really be doing your job, like trying to sell me on your business. You don't know who I am. And but the worst thing was, he's like, yeah, I'm just doing this job for next few months, and then I'm gonna try to get a corporate job, work my way up, and I'm hoping in a couple of years I can be a CEO of my own company. I'm like, man, how old are you? Yeah. He's like 25 years old, and I'm like, just like how out of touch that is, and to not even realize that you're never going to get anywhere unless you do this job well. Like, do this job well, like sell me your products. That's what you should be doing. You shouldn't be complaining about your job and chit-chatting about random stuff and then telling me about your future plans. Focus on your present plans. And I think, that was something that was very important. I don't know if it was a generational thing or just something that we all kind of talked about, is like be in the moment and embrace what you're doing and find satisfaction in the moment. I feel like we're so future focused sometimes that we forget, about the past and the present, which are also very important too.
Yeah, I think if you don't mind my adding to that, I mean, I think that that's one of the double-edged sword of, you've got young people and you say, yeah, but you haven't done anything yet, and then you want this. But on the other hand, that generation seems to be really fearless, and they think that they can do it. And so, if there's a way to temper that, I think it's a great thing ultimately, that, they may get into a job and go, oh, this is just way harder than I thought. But if they can stick with it, they'll probably do real well, because they just have a different mindset. It's just, they just always have this different expectation for when they should get something. But a 25-year-old CEO would be pretty cool. And I think, aim high, and more power to him. But like, definitely, if he's doing a job, he should focus on doing the darn best job he can do right then and there. I totally agree with that. And so I think some of this, and I've got to include myself in this too, because, if on my device and I'm really, whether it's checking email or not, I'm kind of entertaining myself. And so there's just a lot of like, I have 3 seconds to kill at a stoplight. Maybe I'll just check my phone real quick, right? Like, there's no point in that, but I think we're all kind of guilty of doing it. And it's really just this constantly just feeding ourselves entertainment. It's kind of, I think it's bottom line selfish.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. So how can we teach that deeper knowledge? How can we, help people slow down the pace of their lives and really notice what's going on? Any suggestions?
Just that, when I really try to get my students to learn something, I used to just really plow them with repetition, but along the way, I really got onto this concept of, if you want to change your actions or somebody else's actions, you have to address the way they think. If fundamentally they don't agree with what you're saying, or they don't think that you're right, they're not going to moderate their behavior. And so my class pace is pretty fast, but there will be times where we'll take a knee and we'll talk, and I'll say, you don't want to do it like this, and this, and kind of explore it a little bit and get them to think about that. And so I do try to hit my students on the intellectual level, even at a young age. It's amazing what they can understand. But if I can get them to approach certain aspects of life differently, then I may have changed their whole life. Because someday the student I'm working with on, pivoting for a better round kick or something, they may not really remember that, but they may remember that I said, if you see some trash on the floor and you don't pick that up, that's selfish. And because your expectation is that someone else will do it. And that gets them to change the way they think a little bit, or the way they think about achieving their goals, or what does it mean to really train and put forth your best effort. So those are the kinds of things that I hope I'm imparting to my students.
So I really liked your comment about don't just give praise sort of recklessly.
Right.
I certainly have fallen into that trap from time to time. When students first come onto the mats, one of the biggest things that I'm trying to do is just encourage them and support them and get them excited and jazzed up about their training. And I've seen the opposite side of that. In Korea, they don't give any praise, like ever. Like, I remember my Korean brother, he won national championships, and it was the first time his father had given him any praise. And he was like, good job. That was it, And through my whole training over there, I never got any praise. I just got basically broken. And it was very difficult, especially coming from my culture. So where's the balance, and how do you do it at your school?
So that's an excellent question. I, as an instructor, I got to use a lot of words, lot of positive reinforcement and things like that. I don't want to lie to my students, but I throw out praise to keep them on the right course, because I know how it makes me feel. I had a master, and then I had a Korean grandmaster. And when I kind of reconnected with this gentleman, and he came to my school, and he was kind of working with me, and he would say, you know, good, or, you know, that's better. I mean, just I was so excited, but I was an adult, you know. I mean, I'm not a little kid, but just a little thing can be so meaningful, and it can be so effective when working with your students. I mean, we have power in our words. It sometimes seems like they're not listening, but we have power that sometimes gets reported later. You know, a parent will come and say, you know, you said this to my son or my daughter, and it just made all the difference. And so I think it's a tool that has to be used wisely. I'm not sure that I always use it wisely, but I do try to do that. And then another thing that we do is really kind of spotlighting a student that's doing it right. And so if you kind of heap up praise on that student, other students tend to pay attention to that. So it's instead of doing the opposite, which is, you know, probably what we went through a little bit, is this person's stance is wrong or bad or whatever. You know, you just really got to point out the person that's doing a good job and give them the praise that they actually deserve.
Absolutely.
And one of my friends is an instructor, and he really got me kind of thinking differently about it. And he said, it's all about the effort. You know, you got to praise that effort, because results are going to come out differently. Everybody can try, but results are going to come out differently. But you got to praise the one that's trying hard. That makes a big difference.
Yeah, no, that's very wise. You know, when I started martial arts, I felt like I built a real passion for martial arts over the years. And then I went to Korea, and I was training with the best in the world, you know, world champions, national champions, professional Taekwondo players. And it's like all the passion of it is drained out of them. They were so dispassionate about being there and training, and it was so surprising to me, because I was thinking that these guys would be the most passionate. But that system is very much push, 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 and it kind of breaks them. Like even my wife, you know, like I feel like her passion, because she was a Taekwondo player. She was a professional Taekwondo player. We met in training. I don't feel like our passion is at the same level for the martial arts as a whole, and I contribute that after many discussions with her to basically just being forced to train at such a high level and just push, 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 that you just kind of get broken. And so I think there's this real balance that we need to be mindful of, which is we can, you know, like this generation, you know, maybe they're very passionate, and passion is built by positive reinforcement, but skill is built by repetition and hard work. And we really need to remember that balance, and to try to, like what I try to do, this is me personally, is I start with passion and then I go into rigor. You know, I start by building up their passion, getting them excited, and then I start saying, okay, let's take a look at that roundhouse kick. It's really not as good as it could be, and here's how we can change to make it better. But it's not a discussion to have on day one. In Korea, they have that discussion on day one, and they say, right, it's wrong, do it again. It's wrong, do it again. It's wrong, do it again. The kid's like crying, you know, like, I can't figure out how to do it. It's just getting worse every single time. And that breaks people, but it also makes them good. But you have like 3 students, you know, so it's this balance. And I think over my experience in both the Western society and Korean society, is you start with the passion, you build them up, you get them to start identifying as a martial artist, like this is who I am. And then at that point, they have enough strength to take that constructive criticism and be like, okay, look, here's what's wrong. I remember my master, when I got my black belt, all of a sudden I just like, man, everything I do is wrong. Like I thought I knew something because I got my black belt, but you know, my kick is wrong, my punch is wrong, my block is wrong, everything's wrong all the time. My master's always correcting me. And I came home one time crying. So I'm like, he's not correcting any of the other students. And I'm his best student. I train all the time. I'm his highest ranked student. And he's not correcting anyone else. And my mom was like, well, it's because he respects you the most. And I think that has really sunk into me. I was able to take it. I dried off my tears. I got back in there and I pushed myself to be a better martial artist than I was before. But I wouldn't have been able to take it probably as a white belt, just starting out on the mats. I think it would have been a little too much for me and I would have gone and done little league soccer or something. How do you feel? What do you think about that? Does that ring true to you? And is that kind of what you try to do?
Passion is the darn funniest thing in the world. I mean, I could be super passionate about broccoli and I can try to get everybody, to get on board and listen, it's good for you. It tastes great. And ultimately, if I convince somebody, you got to try this, you got to, and there's going to be people that walk away and go, that's the worst thing I ever ate. And I'll say, but you agree it's good for you, and they'll say, yeah, but it was just horrible. And I will not ever repeat that experience again. And so sometimes we take our own passion and we try to show other people how great it is. And it's just never going to sink in. But at the same time, you could have a student such as yourself, and you could, just pound the student into the ground and they're going to keep getting back up and go, I want more because I love this. Mm-hmm. And so passion is so hard to kind of share with people, and it's so hard to squash in just the right person. And so I think our job as instructors is just kind of pass on the information, share with people that, the things that we're passionate about. But some people are not going to make a life choice out of it. They might spend 9 months in training, or they might spend 9 years in training. So it's really hard to say. And this has probably been your experience too. There's been people you thought would, they would quit, and then they're still with you, to this day. And there's people that, also surprise you and say, oh, this student's going to be a superstar if they'll just, and then where's their next class? And didn't show back up. So it's a hard thing to be able to tell people what it is that you love so much, and then to have them respond with that same level of interest.
So it sounds like you have 2 schools, sir. I assume you must have a leadership team or CIT team or something like that.
I do. So at the location that I'm sitting at right now, it's kind of my headquarters, but I actually don't teach at this location. So I have a great lady, Miss Dara Gilliland. She teaches over here. She's the head instructor, and she kind of handles everything. She handles A to Z and all the students, the testing. She just does everything. So she does a tremendous job for us over here. Wow. And I teach at the other location, which is in Pearland. It's just a little bit south of Houston. And so I've got a team of guys over there. So I teach about 4 days a week over there, and then the guys make up the difference. And they're a great team of guys. I mean, they just, whether I'm there or not, I mean, they know what to do.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that. Mm-hmm. The reason why I brought it up is because I wanted to kind of tie it back into what we were talking about, which is, one thing I found out real quick was if you aren't eventually honest with people, when you need them to be honest with themselves by being employees, you kind of run into a brick wall. And for me, it's been an interesting having my own leadership team and trying to. I have very high standards for the martial arts instruction that we teach here at the academy, and as extension, anyone who works for me is a reflection of that instruction, right? So everyone needs to be at a pretty high level of ability if they're going to be running the floor and doing those things. And so when I'm working with a kid, then a lot of times I'll say, oh, great technique, keep going, blah, blah, blah. Good job, because I'm just trying to build them up. But then when I start bringing these people on staff, sometimes they're like, oh, Master Olds, you're so hard on me. Like, you've never been that hard on me before I was on staff. And I'm like, well, it's because what you do now really matters, because if you teach the wrong technique, or you do a bad job of greeting somebody, we could lose a student, we could get a bad review. So we really need to do our very best every single day on the mats. And for some of them, it's like the first time anyone's ever said, hey, wake up. Like, you really need to try your hardest. how have you navigated that? How have you been patient with your students, your staff specifically, and yet try to maintain that high level of standard that you hold for yourself and your business? Because I think that's a very challenging thing to achieve.
It's a funny thing. I've been an employer. I just celebrated 25 years in business just a few weeks ago. November 1st was 25 years.
Congratulations.
And I was kind of 19 when I started, and what you think you know at 19 is a lot different than what you think you know at 44. And not to say that I know it all, but I learned how to treat people better. I think so. I hope so. I've had, because I own a childcare and so forth. I mean, I've had people just stay with me for decades in employment, and I don't attribute it to that because I'm such a great guy and such a great leader, but I do try to create a culture like we're a family, and I don't try to act like we're an actual family and that kind of thing, but I try to create that environment where people feel welcome to come and work in this environment. But it's a philosophy thing. Like the way I treat my student on the floor is the way that I'm going to treat my staff member too. And so I show them a lot of respect. We cut a lot of jokes, but we make things like their birthdays are important. Everybody's going to get a birthday card, a handwritten birthday card from me, because I think that shows them respect. And I think some of that comes back is loyalty. And you've got to praise people when they do well, just like our students. You got to praise people that are doing things right. And sometimes it can be public. I don't think very often, but sometimes they need to be called out. At least privately, you need to be told that they've done wrong, or they've done something they could have done so much better. And so without doing that, then we don't have our businesses or our schools running the way that is in line with our vision. And I think we sell ourselves short when we accept less than what we expect from our staff members.
So to kind of
It's just, for me, it's clean because I don't have to think differently about a student with a staff member. I try to be fair and good to everyone.
That's good. I think that's how we're all striving to be. It's just when there's higher stakes, there's a tendency to, really want to make sure that it's done right. Just to tie this back to what we're talking about before about focus and people wanting kind of instant gratification, how that can kind of lead to amplification of poor focus. One thing that I've noticed with staff members sometimes as they come on to the team is they don't want to clean the toilets. They don't want to be the assistant instructor who they feel like they don't have anything really to do, although there's tons to do as an assistant instructor, I'm sure you know. They want to be the lead instructor on the floor, and they want to do the important jobs. They want to do the big creative projects. And I think it kind of goes back to this idea of, instant gratification and lack of attention. How have you sort of navigated that with your staff?
Yeah, well, we've seen people that weren't fond of cleaning toilets and things like that. And so what we try to do is to give them the vision of, if you want to grow in your career, then you're going to have to do some things that you don't want to do, which is essentially like, if you want to reach this next color belt, you're going to have to do that thing that you don't like in class, whether that's sparring or it's focus pad work. You're going to have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. We had this young lady that worked for us. I mean, she was just terrific. I mean, she was one of the best people that ever worked for me in that role as like an administrative assistant. And she came from a culture where if she served somebody else, that meant that she was subservient. And so we said, one of the things that you would need to do is, ask the parents if they'd like a coffee, come bring them a coffee. And she didn't have any objection with cleaning a toilet or anything like that. She had an objection to serving somebody else coffee. And so she brought up this objection, and I said, well, if you cannot lower yourself to serve someone else, then you can't work for me. And she kind of got it, understood it, and she did great. And she's just, I can't say enough good things about her. But people have to understand that serving doesn't make you, right, the servant. But we should all have like a servant's heart. Because one of my favorite things to do for my students is to hold the door open. I mean, I'm not sure if there's a lowlier job than that, but it allows me a chance to do something nice and simple for a student, and an opportunity to talk to them at the same time. So just creating that mindset among your people is big. But we're fighting with lack of attention. We're just kind of always fighting and teaching. But essentially my role, as I see it, is as a teacher, and that just takes on a lot of different forms. And so I take the responsibility of teaching my staff pretty seriously. I mean, that's something that I don't think that I overlook.
It's awesome. Yeah. Jesse, any final thoughts?
Nothing off the top of my head other than just, thanking you for your time and the ideas you've shared this morning. I so identify with the teacher counterpart to the instructor, and I have played so much in my own mind about, okay, what are the similarities and differences between an instructor and a teacher, and a professor even, or a tutor or a mentor, and like all of these titles that we can relate to, we can give ourselves, we can be bestowed, like have somebody give these titles to us. I've been really sitting with this for a few years, and to hear your words about the teacher position and the instructor position and the master instructor position and all of this, I appreciate that, and gives me more to sit with and consider.
Yeah.
Just going back one step to what you were talking about before about being a servant, reminded me. Have you ever seen the movie The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, or read the book The Peaceful Warrior?
I didn't. No, I don't think so.
Oh, well, it's not about martial arts, but it feels like a martial arts movie. It's about a gymnast who gets injured, and then he works his way out of the injury by
I think I've heard of it, actually.
Yeah, he meets this guy who's like, he's this very mysterious man who works at a gas station, and all of a sudden he appears on top of the roof, and he has no idea how he got up there. And he has all these very wise things to say, and he eventually teaches him how to be like the greatest gymnast ever. And one of the things that he says, which has always kind of come to me whenever I hear my students complain about, washing out the toilets, is the gymnast, in that he had to work at the gas station to get his training in, basically, to have this guy mentor him. And always complain about it. He's like, I'm a professional gymnast, I'm a college gymnast, I'm like, top of my game. Why am I wasting my time, doing gas here at the gas station? And the guy was like, this is the most important job. Like, every job is important. This is a service job, and service jobs is like the most important of all. And the way he described that, is being hard for me to do it justice because it's been many years since I watched it, but basically just describing how beautiful a service job like that can be, like just the way that he's, pouring in the gas and greeting the customer and filling them with enjoyment for that day, was a beautiful thing. And I always think about that movie. Probably doesn't have as much relevance now since you haven't seen it, but if you had seen it, you should go watch it. It's definitely very powerful. A movie all martial artists should see, I think.
Yeah, the concept is there. Service it can be a beautiful thing. And, if we always do something, for somebody to praise us, then we probably have the wrong motivation. So a lot of stuff should be behind the scenes. Otherwise, our motivation is wrong. Yeah, that's good.
Absolutely. All right, sir. Well, Master Hong, it was great to meet you. My master was actually Master Hong too.
Okay.
A little different Hong, but
yeah, you were my student. I look really good, right? My age, right?
You look younger than I am, but no, just kidding. No, you do look younger than me. I look like an old man. But all Asians, they look so young. It's so unfair.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'll see what I can do.
Good
I'll talk to
genes.
these higher ups.
Yeah. But anyway, Master Hong, it was just great having you on the show. You had some really important and wise things to say about attention, and we'd love to have you back on if you ever want to talk about a different topic. Wishing you
Absolutely.
the best, your school out there in Houston, your 2 schools. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I definitely love to come back.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell. We offer in-person, group, and private lessons at our facility in Kyle, Texas, as well as virtual lessons anywhere in the world. If you'd like to learn more about our programs, you can find us online at risingphoenixtkd.com.